Hello, I am Michelle from Michelle's Fancy Felt, and today we are looking at how to make this robin bauble. So this comes as a kit, and you get enough for two of these baubles, so you can always keep one for yourself and give one as a gift, or keep both of them. Who knows? Let me just show you what you get in your kit. It all comes in a box like so. And in the box, you have pretty much everything that you need. So it comes with a foam mat and also a bit of felt. This is just felt that you get from a craft shop. And that helps protect your mat, but also when we're making the wings and the tails, it stops them from sticking to the mat quite so much. So you get those. You also get a set of 5 needles. So in here you have 1 coarse needle, 2 medium needles and 2 fine needles. And onto the wool. You get 2 balls of core wool. So this is what you use for making the inside. And you'll believe it, but this kind of squashes down to make the bauble. So that's what each one is for one of the baubles. Plus a bit of spare wool just in case you need it. We have some brown wool. This is what you need for covering the core wool for the main body part. And then we have some oatmeal and some dark orange, and that is for adding the details. We have some tails and wings. So these are made out of felt, and I'll show you how to do those very soon. You have some thread. This is for when you're hanging it up at the end, when you're all finished. And you have a couple of beaks and some eyeballs. You see, now the eyeballs, although they are supposed to be 4mm eyeballs, they do sometimes come in a bit of a range. So I have checked to make sure that each of them, there's matching pairs. So just have a look when you're getting them out, make sure that you've got 2 that match, because you don't want them in 2 different sizes. Okay, so that is everything that comes with your kit. Let's get started. So we are going to start making the cute little robin bauble, and you'll need all the bits from the kit. And the extras that you will need are some kind of glue. I have this high-tack glue, which is actually my favourite craft glue. If you do anything with kids or anything, it's really good for that as well. Or the Gorilla Glue gel is good because it doesn't set straight away. You're better off not using super glue because that kind of adheres instantly, whereas this one you've got a few minutes to play around with it. So those are the 2 that I recommend. If you don't have either of those, then something just like a PVA glue should hold it in. It's just for sticking in the eyes. What you will also need, and the beak, when you're sticking in the eyes and beak, is some kind of awl. I recommend a tapered awl, which is like this. Those are the best ones because you really need to make quite a big hole, or any kind of awl if you've got one in your toolbox. Failing that, you can achieve it with a cocktail stick, but it just takes a little bit more work, and there's always a risk it might break. So an awl ideally. Those are all the bits that you need. Oh, and you'll need a needle as well for when you're attaching the string. Okay, so let's get started. So you need your core wool, and it will come in a long rope like so. So if you move your mat out the way for now, we don't need it straight away. It's easy to have a really hard surface because we want to try and squash as much air out of this wool as possible. Thing is with needle felting, what you're doing is you're combining the fibres and you're squashing the air out. So you'll notice with your core wool, it looks massive at the moment, but if you scrunch it down, you will see it's only actually like bauble shape. It's like a tennis ball kind of size. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to squash out all of the air and combine the fibres, and that's what needle felting is. So the more air you get out of it to start off with, the less work you'll have to do later on. And you'll find in your core wool, you might have, and in the coloured wool, you might have the odd bit of vegetation, bit of grass, things like that. You can pick them out if they disturb you, but the odd bit, it doesn't really matter because this is all going to be covered with colour anyway. I only really take them out if they're really big bits in the core wool. Okay, so to get started, move that bit out of the way. I'm going to start pretty near the beginning, and I'm just going to tie this in a knot. So I'm leaving a little bit off of the end. You tie it in quite a tiny. Now, when you're pulling this, don't have your hands really far apart because the fibres are short. If you have your hands far apart, you will actually pull it apart. You have to have your hands near to where you're pulling, because otherwise you'll end up tearing it apart. Okay, so I've got a bit of a knot, and then we're going to start making the circle. So I've moved my mat out of the way, and I'm going to start rolling up the core wool. I'm going to put some coloured paper here so you can see it a bit better. My white desk with white wool. Okay, so I have my knot here and a little tail, so just tuck the tail over, and then you're going to start rolling up and up. So you just do it a couple of times. Now I'm really pushing down on it as I'm rolling because you want it to keep really tight. Okay, that will save you a lot of work later on if you keep it nice and tight. Once you've done a couple of rolls, you see I'm getting these fluffy edges. You just tuck those edges in and then do a couple more rolls. Okay, now if I carried on rolling like this, we're going to end up with like a long sausage shape, which we don't want. So we're going to turn it like you would if you're making a snowman. You kind of have to turn every so often. So holding the one end, this other end I'm going to turn upwards. So now you've got a kind of triangle shaped end. And then I'm going to start rolling that way. Tuck in any of the fuzzy bits. Now obviously if you need to go back and have a look how I do this again, then you can just rewind it and start going. I'm gonna do a couple more rolls. You see I'm getting fuzzy again, so you tuck in those bits. And now I'm going to do another turn because we want to keep rolling and turning to get that circle shape. Whoops. If you find that it keeps kind of unraveling, what you can do is, providing it's nice and tight, just take your green needle and give it a little bit of a stab just to hold that bit in place, and then you can carry on as you were. And now I'm going to do another turn again. This end's gone a little bit fluffy, so I'm going to kind of tuck that in. And you see we're starting to get a bit of a circle shape. As you go along, it gets a bit trickier to tuck in that end because it's actually quite wide. Now I'm going to do another turn. Tuck in those bits. Now, if you end up with little bits like this, don't worry too much because they're really fuzzy. We can just stab those in. You see how I can squash those in? That's what we'll do with the needle. So don't worry if there's the odd bit. When you get to the stage where you can't really tuck it in, then don't worry too much about those bits. See now, just doing those last bits. There we go. And then hold that in place. So these are the ends here. I'm holding that in place. Now being very careful of your fingers, because if you stab your fingers, it does hurt. So don't try not to stab your fingers. So when you're first doing your felting, I recommend not watching TV or anything. Obviously you're watching me currently, but perhaps just pause whilst you're concentrating on your needle, or just listen. So you can actually concentrate on where your needles are. As you get more experience and you get used to it, I mean, I don't stab myself very often now, only if I'm felting late at night and I'm a bit tired. So what we're doing is felting in those ends, you see, and then I can let go of it and it's not going to unravel. Okay, so you can see it doesn't look very much like a circle at the moment, but if I kind of tuck in those edges, you can see how it can get to that circle shape. So now, to do our stabbing, I'm going to take this paper away. We need to have the felting mats back. We use a felting mat because your needle does go slightly through the wool, can go through the wool, and if you stab your needle onto a hard surface, then it will break your needles. So these needles, they're very sharp, but they're also very fragile. The coarser ones are a bit thicker, so they're not quite as fragile. But when you're stabbing, you go straight in and straight out. Don't go in and then bend and then come out, because that will break your needles. And if you end up with needles inside here, they are very tricky to get out. Known people have to like kind of cut into it. And even then, I mean, it's quite literally like trying to find a needle in a haystack or a wool stack. If you have animals or anything, some people do actually just chuck it away, because, you know, if your animal gets hold of it and starts biting it or anything like that, heaven forbid. But they could obviously get damaged with the needles, or if you have small children. So it's up to you. In my house, I wouldn't be too worried about it. I don't have a dog. My kids are older. They don't tend to chew on Christmas decorations. So yeah, so I don't worry about it too much. I try and get it out if I can feel it, but if I can't feel it, I do it. So it's up to you. And obviously, if you're giving it as a gift, you have to think very carefully and let the person know. But yes, what we try and do is try and avoid broken needles. So once you've got to this stage, we're now going to start stabbing it. Now, if we were to stab all on one place, you'd end up with a flat bit there. So what we do is we stab, you see I'm stabbing around in a circle just to get that edge, and then we just turn and you just keep stabbing and turning. Now can you see all here I've got this fluffy bit, so I'm going to go, I've turned it over. I won't stab it that way because then I'll end up with this ridge. You want to try and smooth it down. Can you see? So if I stab this way, then that just smooths it in. There we go. And that's smoothed down a little bit. And we're going to go all over. Now, when you're using the green needle, if you've rolled really tight, then you'll probably find after a few bits of stabbing, you might find that it starts feeling quite tricky to get your needle in. That's because the fibres are really kind of squashed together. And because this is a thicker needle, the green one, it's the coarse needle, your needle is finding it more difficult to get in. So when you get to that stage, you can move on to your red needle. Now all the time, I'm just stabbing and turning it. So thinking about having that circular sphere shape. I want to get down all of these fluffies. Now, you see at the moment, it's quite squashy. You can see my thumb going into it. You need it to be about tennis ball hard, just slightly below a tennis ball. Or another way of measuring it, you know, with a steak measurement, how well a steak is cooked, it needs to be around, so I think this is well to, no, is that medium to well done? If you feel that, it needs to be around a well done kind of level of firmness. I know it's a bit easier to do in the workshops because you can feel what it actually feels like, but think of a tennis ball slightly squashier than a tennis ball, basically. It's how firm we need to get it. If it's not that firm, then you'll find when you are adding details, then you'll end up with little craters because you'll be stabbing down and it will be compacting the wool underneath. Like say you're adding eyes or something like that. I know with this we just do glass eyes, but if you're adding eyes and the like, as you're stabbing into it, it'll end up with just little craters. So can you see here, I don't know where you can see that it's looking a bit bobbly at the moment. Don't worry too much about that. That is just where I've stabbed, it's compressed that bit and squashed that bit down, and then there's poofy bits as well. So what we have to do is keep stabbing until we've got rid of all of the poofy bits. Now to make that easier, I use a multi-needle tool. Now with a rubbing kit, they just come with individual needles. But I do sell the multi-needle tools if you want one of those, or wooden handles as well. I sell. So my favourite is a 3-needle holder. And this just makes it a bit easier. This is actually, these have 38s, these have the medium needles in. So I've got to that in the stage now. It's starting to feel a bit tricky with my green needle. I'm really having to kind of use a bit more force with it. So when it gets a little bit tough, then go to your 38s. So you've got two 38s. So what you can do, if you don't have a multi-needle, is take the two needles and an elastic band, and you just attach them together like so. And then you have your own budget multi-needle tool, and then you've got a couple of needles there that you can use for stabbing. Okay, and that just helps speed it up a little bit. And those are the red ones, so we're onto the red needles now, providing it's not too poofy. Now every time you're not using your needle, you see what I've done, stab them into your board, into your mat, because say you just lie it down, A, you could kind of catch it and stab yourself, but B, if you knock that, it falls on the floor, it could stab you in the thigh, you know, you might go to catch it, not thinking, and stab it in your hand. So really think about being careful with your needles, because they do hurt. You know, you don't want to bleed all over your work. It's not a good look on a robin, is it? So we just take some time, turning and stabbing all the time. Watching out for your fingers. As you can see at the moment, it's still looking, you can see the kind of shadows where it's all a bit, it's all fuzzy still, it's all bumpy, it's all squashy, so it needs a lot more stabbing there. So this is the kind of labour intensive bit. It takes a little while, but it's very therapeutic, don't you find? Just stab away, relieve all the stresses of the day. And you're turning all the time so you don't get any flat bits, keeping a sphere shape. If you find it's going out of shape slightly, you can give it a bit of a wibble in your hands as if you're making a snowball, and that helps to the felting as well. Now, if you find as you are stabbing, you end up with a dented part or a ridge or anything where it's not, you know, it's not perfectly spherical, but that's why you've got your spare wool. So what you can do is just take some of your wool, and you can either do it as a whole top coat. So if you see, I've just squidged it around, but always keeping it nice and tight. And then you would just needle felt that on, so stab it to start off with to get it in place, and then go all over it lots so that all firmly attaches. Or if you've just got a small bit, you can just pull off a little bit. So to pull the wool off, as I said, if you have your hands together, so I'm really forcing, it won't come apart there because I'm trying to pull the same fibres, and all it would do would snap them. But if you have your hands slightly further apart, then you can easily just tear a piece off. And then you can either, if it's a little hole, you can kind of, you know, if you've got a bit of a crater, you can make that into a bit of a ball, stick that on there, stab, stab, stab. And then if it looks a bit obvious, you can then put a kind of a top coat on to make it look smoother. So those are some different options. But it's best just to carry on stabbing it. Like I stage now, it's getting there, but it's still a bit squashy. You can see my fingers are still going into it. I can still squash it. It's not a tennis ball shape yet. And when you're stabbing with the core wool, make sure you're going far in. You don't just do the surface, you see. So that would be doing the surface. You want it to go in all the way into it, or when you're doing it with your single needle, that would be just doing it on the surface, but you want it to go in. You can see where the needle changes size. Oh, it's not focusing. Will that work better? Oh, whoops. No, it doesn't want to focus. So you can kind of see where the needle has a wider part and then a slightly skinnier bit and then a really skinny bit. You see on there? Now the wider part, that is obviously really solid. The slightly skinnier bit, that's nice and solid as well. And then it's this really thin part as the part that's got all the barbs on. So that's the, you can kind of vaguely see them. So that's the actual needle, this thin part here. So you want to go in all the way. So that whole bit is going through. So you're going up to this kind of level. And that means if you just do it on the surface, you're going to end up with a solid shell and a really squidgy core. And then what will happen when you then start adding the detail, it will then just misshape, because, you know, it would be like pushing on a tea cake that's got marshmallow in the middle. You know, the chocolate shell is solid, but then if you push onto it, it's just going to end up denting underneath, and it will just be like that. I do love a tea cake. Okay, I'm going to carry on stabbing, and I will see you when it's looking a bit smoother. So all the time, you just carry on stabbing and turning, keeping that sphere shape. So if it's looking a bit egg-shaped, then stab a bit more on that area, just to keep it in a good shape that you want. Okay, I'll see you when it's looking smoother. Now you can see with mine, it's getting firmer, but can you still see, and it's a bit hard when it's white, there's kind of little ridgy, puffy bits. Now that's because some of them still need more stabbing and everything, and you can feel around your ball, you might have some areas that feel more squishy than others. I've got a squishier part here, so it just all needs to be really firm all the way through. See, I've got a really hard bit here as well, so just make sure you're concentrating on those squishy areas, and if it goes a bit out of shape, you can roll it around again, give it a bit of a squash to get it into a nice round shape that you want. Okay, let's carry on stabbing. I'm listening to an audiobook. I like listening to audiobooks whilst I'm stabbing. It's very relaxing. Can't really read whilst you're needle felting. Right, so my sphere is now pretty solid. We don't need to get it completely tennis ball hard at this stage, because as we add the colour, it is going to firm it up a little bit more anyway, because we're not going to leave it like this, so we're going to put some more colour on it. So to add the colour, you take your sliver, that's what it's called when it's a long rope. Now see, this is quite thick, so we don't want to add loads and loads of bulk on there. We just want to add colour, but we don't want it to have any gaps. So if you just stretch it out a little bit, separate those fibres slightly. If we do end up with gaps, it's fine. We can just put some more colour on those anyway. So taking your ball and the end of your coloured wool, you then hold it down nice and tight, and then just do a few stabs, and this is just attacking it in place so it doesn't slide as you're going along. And then we're going to start working away from where we started. If you do it kind of this way, you can end up with ridges, so you want to be going towards where you're adding more. Now you can see here I've got a little bit of a gap there, but we'll sort that out afterwards. It's very easy to just plug in any gaps. So I've just done a little bit of stabbing. Now I'm going to move on, hold it down a bit more. Tap, tap, tap. Stab it down. So you can be using, if you've got the 2 needle, you can be using the 2 needles at this stage. To tack it down. It just helps with to help speed it up a little bit. And you see I've nearly got to where we started, so I want to go over that slightly because you can see it's really wispy there. So I go all the way to where like the proper colour starts, and then holding the bit that I want on my sphere there, I'm just going to pull it slightly. Remember your hands slightly further apart, so you can actually pull it and not just tear the fibres. And then we'll go back to where we've got to, tack all that on. Move along a little bit more. Tack that on. Just being careful of your hands and your fingers. I do also sell finger protectors. They come with the starter kit, or I do sell them individually as well. So if you have finger protectors, you can. I don't, to be honest, I don't tend to wear them very often unless I'm making very small things. I find something big like this, I just put my fingers out the way. So I've got to the end now, so I'm just tacking down the end, always going in this direction. If you start to go in the other direction, you'd get a ridge, so you want to keep it nice and smooth. There we go. Now that's all tacked down. You can see it's all fluffy still, and it's got some dented bits and poofy bits. We're going to sort that out afterwards. We're just getting the colour on for now. So obviously we've got 2 ends. So I just take a small amount that's going to cover it, pull that apart, stretch it out slightly, place it on there, holding it down, because remember all the time with wool, you want to be squashing out the air. And don't worry if it goes over, because it's only wispy parts here, it shouldn't make your ball a different shape or anything, because we're just adding a small amount there. Tack all that down. Now I know these needles are blue, by the way. They're just from a different supplier than I use now. So the ones that come with the kits are Heidi Feathers needles, which are the best needles. Everyone says the best needles that you can get around here in the UK. And I think even people in America do sometimes get the Heidi Feathers ones as well. I don't know many of the American stockists, but yeah, Heidi Feathers, best needles. I use those. You will find in the cheaper kits the needles just a bit dire. That's like in your ones, you know, your Amazon kits. Okay, so once that's all covered, I'm just going to check all over, making sure I haven't got any gaps. No, that all looks fine. So now I'm going to work all over it, getting all of this attached. So you don't have to go really far in again. We're not worrying about doing the cord. This time you can just go in. You see, I'm probably only going in maybe a centimetre at the most, so it doesn't take as much effort. Now I like to go around in a circle to make sure I've got it all done. I either do it in lines, so I do it in a line like that, and then go along slowly. Now, providing your core is nice and solid, you won't change the shape of it. Or, alternatively, I go around in circles. You see here I've got a little bit of a black bit. Careful fishing out bits with your needles, because if you kind of stick it in and try and pull it, it will just snap your needle. So if it's further in, if it's just on the surface, you can kind of catch it without sticking needles in too much, then that's fine. But if it's further than that, get a pair of tweezers or a cocktail stick or something like that, and use that, otherwise you'll end up snapping your needles. I do also sell the hide and feathers needles, so if you need any more of those. And then we're just going all the way around. So you can see I'm just going around in a circle. I'll do that all the way over. It's kind of very zen needle felting. Doing things in a ordered way. Okay, I'm just going to carry on with this, and I shall see you very soon. Right, so once you have got to this stage where all of that wool is tacked down, it's smooth, not too hairy, you can tell when it's properly done when there aren't any lumpy bits anymore. So when you've got to that stage, that means all the air has been squashed out and it's all attached. If you've got lumpy bits, it means the bits that are high aren't actually attached, so then they could easily be kind of rucked up and things like that. So once you're happy with it, you should have some brown wool left over, which we'll use for the wings and the tails later on. But now we're going to add the tummy. So if you have a look at here, it's got a nice orange tummy. So decide kind of which way round you want it to be. It can always be squashed a bit if it's not quite the right shape. And we're going to put some orange on its tummy. So you've got some of your orange here. So again, you don't want to add loads of bulk or anything. If it's quite squashed together, you can pull it apart a little bit. And kind of think, before you start stabbing, think about where you want it to go, how big you want it to be. And I am just going to tear off that bit was a little bit bulky. You don't want a bulky edge. So you're going to want the eyes to be above it. And you want a little bit of space around all of the edge. So I'm going to start tacking down this top layer. Just with this one has a red needle in it. So I'm just going to start tacking it down so it's in place. But you see how I'm not going all the way to the edge, because what we're going to do to make a neater edge, we're going to go in a little bit. So it will be slightly smaller than where you put it. So I'm just kind of tacking it down. See there, it's making lots of needle holes because it's got lots of air in it still. And then you can either kind of fold it under, or if you've got this bit's a bit fat, I'm just going to pinch a little bit off. It's easy to pinch bits off if you're doing them in small sections. I'm going to start tacking down there. So keep going back, looking how it's looking, looking how it looks. Makes sense. Not getting that tacked down, so thinking about the shape. You can fold it under to make that nice circle. We are going to add some of the creamy oatmeal colour to the edges as well, so don't worry too much about the edges being perfect. I'm going to fold that under because that was a little bit sparse, that bit. Now if you get it on there and you think it's not the right shape, or you don't like the look of it, you can either add some more. So say I've got mine like here, I think that looks all right. Got a little bit of brown all the way around. Obviously we are going to, like, the edges are going to be covered by a little bit of the oatmeal colour as well. So it's going to be slightly smaller than it looks now. But if you find you've got a bit, like you see down here, perhaps that area isn't quite so satisfactory, you can take a bit of your other wool, your spare wool, just pop it on there and stab it in place. On the other hand, if you feel like you've made it too big, you can either stab down into the edges, you see how that's making it a bit smaller, or alternatively, if you feel like it's gone completely wrong, you can pull it all off or pull off little sections. So if you're doing it close to your finger, just take small bits off each time. That's more doable. You can't really, if you start trying to pull off a really big bit, you're going to end up pulling off the whole thing. So see if you're happy with it. I've forgotten which way was up now. Don't know, we'll decide that later on here. Maybe like that. Okay, and now we're just going to get it all tacked down. So like we did with the colour, I'm going to use my double needle, get it all attached, and nice and smooth. So the edges don't worry too much. They don't have to be. With some things, if the edges are going to be on show, you'd want them to be perfectly round, like if you're doing an eyeball with felt or a dot or something like that, you'd want the edges obviously to be perfect. But with this, because they're going to be covered, then we don't need to worry too much about it. Now I'm doing this with my red needle first of all, and once I've done it with my red needle and got rid of most of the air, I'm going to go over it with my blue needles, so the fine needles. And what they do is they just smooth the surface, make it look really nice and professional. Just refined. And that's the difference that you'll find, like, really between the kind of amazing works that you do and when you start looking into it, you know, there are amazingly talented people out there. And when you're first beginning, it's more difficult to understand like how firm things have to be and when it's actually finished. So you might end up to start off with things being a bit hairier, that when you do more of it, then you'll start really realizing that actually we'll start getting used to how to do it and how refined you want it to look. You can see that's getting all, I've still got some poofy bits around here, so I'm working on those now. You'll see I've been doing it for a while, so I probably felt a lot faster than a beginner would. My muscles have got a bit used to it, but it can get tight even now, especially when I'm doing the core wool. I do get an achy arm. But if you're doing that, you can start doing different things. So I just kind of rest my wrist and then just use my hand. That's a different stance you can use if you find you're getting achy, or just take a break. It doesn't all have to be done in one go. And that's the beauty of felt. As long as you haven't got a dog that's going to come and chew it apart or anything like that, you can just leave it. There's nothing, you know, it's not going to dry up. It's not, nothing bad's going to happen to it. Obviously, unless it does get eaten by a dog. I've seen a few of those. Okay, now that's all smoothed on, but I am going to use my two blue needles. These are the fine needles. I'm going to put an elastic band around them and use those to really finesse it. And just tie my elastic band around them. And the elastic band works as a good grip as well, so you could even use that if you don't have the wooden needle holders, which I do sell these ones as well. If if you need any of those. But if you don't have one of those, these do actually help you hold them as well, because obviously it adds a bit more grip. Metal's a bit slippery, whereas the elastic bands. But yeah, in needle felting, you know, you use a lot of technical materials like toothpicks and skewers and elastic bands. It's quite a cheaper craft as far as many of them go. You see, I'm just going all over the surface with the fine needles. Really smooth it over. You can do this all over the brown bit as well, but I find with the brown, because it's kind of a multicolour, it doesn't show up the needle marks as much as like a solid colour does. So I don't bother. You see, I put my finger near the edge, and that's kind of how far I'm going into it. Because with the fine needles, you don't need to go in very far. I don't know if you can see. If I show you in the light, can you see those little cuts in them? Those are actually the barbs. So with the fine needles, the first one is really low down. So you don't need to be going in all the way. Just bouncing into your surface. Because we've refined the core wool, we're now just attaching the fibres onto the lower surface. Now you see here I've got a bit of vegetable matter. I'm not going to use my fine needles, especially try not to use your fine needles for picking out bits, because they are they're especially more fragile because they're thinner. Right, there we go. That looks done now. See, it's all nice, smooth, orange tummy. There's no kind of airy bits or anything else like that. It's all the same level. So now I'm going to decide which way I'm going round, and I'm going to add some of the creamness. So we go around the, oh sorry, so we go around the orange part, and then we're going down underneath kind of where the tail will end. So we'll sort out the eyes later on, so we're just going to do these areas for now. Okay, so taking your oatmeal colour for the part around the edge, I'm going to break some of this off, and then I'm just going to take off a small section. So you see, I'm just pulling off the edge on those fibres, so I've got just a bit of a line. And then I'm just going to start doing that just around the edge. Now I want some of this wispy bit to go on to my orange. I don't want it to be kind of like a solid block like that. I like it a bit wispy, like so. So again, I'm going to take my fine needles for this and just start tacking that on. Now I'm using the fine needles for this because with the wispy parts, if you do it with a coarser, with a harsher needle, then you'll end up with kind of big, it loses some of the wispiness when you do it with a harsher needle. So you just end up, you can really see the needle marks in it. So I'm doing all of this just with a fine needle, and you see how I'm kind of pulling it down where I want it to go, keeping it the same thickness. So I've run out there, so I'm going to take this around here. And again, if you tack it all down and you don't like it, you can always rip it back up, or you can just adjust it a little bit. So if you think it's going too far out, you can just go at an angle. You see how that's pushing it in there? So you can just go at it at an angle to make it thinner. To make it fatter, you can do it from the other edge. So you can slowly just push it out that way. So that bit where I'd gone in, I'm now just pushing it gently. So however it's gone wrong, the beauty of wool, most of the time it can actually be rectified. Okay, so now that's all in place, I am just going to check it all looks okay. I might do this bit a little bit further in. And then I'm going to make sure it's all really attached. That's looking nice. It's gone a little bit thin here. I might just add a little bit more there because you can quite see the orange through it on that section. I'm just going to take a little bit more. I've got an even thinner bit here because I don't want too much on there, but I might make that even thinner. So I'm just adding kind of a really wispy bit on there. So I don't want it too bulky. I just want to use it to cover that up a bit more. And then you can kind of play with it until you're happy with it. Now if you don't think it's quite wispy enough on the edges, what you can do is again take a really small bit and then just add that on there so it's still touching the main part but also going on the orange a bit. You see how that's just added a bit more of the wispiness to it. And then you can just keep playing with it until you're happy with it. There we go. And I always think with things from nature and with people, faces, things like that, they don't have to be perfect because no two robins look exactly alike, do they? They all have different areas. So just do it until you're happy with it. I try not to be too much of a perfectionist with these things. I just like to do it to enjoy it, because you'll find when you've finished, it'll suddenly just look beautiful. Okay, still trying to decide where my eyes are going to go. I think I'm going to have my eyes up here. Okay, it's looking like this. So I might stab this down a little bit, so I've got some more room for the eyes. Now if you don't feel, like if you're trying to move it around and you don't feel it's doing enough with the fine needles, you can actually take like your red needles and do it with that. If it needs a bit of shoving or anything. The coarser needles are good at shoving. There we go, that's a bit more room for the eyes. So now we're going to do its kind of bottom section. So this is going to come under the wings and under the tail. So again, taking some of our oatmeal. I'm just going to plop it on like this and just do all of this section, and then I'm going to sort out that wing bit and decide whether I've got it in the right place when I get to that part. Using my fine needles again, because they are quite effective anyway, but also it'll take the job having to go over it. Now the wings, when we add the wings, there is going to be, we're going to put a little bit of brown over them as well, if you see, like this, to kind of make it a bit wispy. So don't worry too much about where it ends and where it starts, because we can alter that as we go along. So looking at, we want this side to end in roughly the same place, so I might have a little bit too much over this side. When you are pulling your wool, make sure you hold on to the bit you want to stay. Just as you're pulling it, you could then end up pulling all of it off. Just hold down that wispy bit a bit. There we go. Just keep stabbing till it's all in and you're happy with it. So next we are going to do the wings and the tail. For those you need your pieces of felt. Now remember, with the wings they are going to be on opposite sides, so make sure you're doing them in an opposite way. I've made that mistake on too many occasions. So to do these, obviously we don't just put on the felt. What we're going to do is put some of the wool onto there. So, big brown bit. Take a pinch of your wool that is just slightly larger than your felt piece. And because it's quite fat at the moment, obviously we don't want a really fat chunky tail, so stretch it out a bit. With this, because it's brown underneath, it doesn't matter if there is some of the felt showing through. This looks like it's going to be too much, so you want it to just slightly go around the edges. I'll add some more on the top in a minute. You see I've just folded it over the edges. Now don't be too rough with your folding, because otherwise you can actually fold your felt underneath, and we want to keep the rest of the same shape. And I'm doing this is with my red needle, just tacking it down again. And as you're felting it, it does actually felt the fibres into your wool felt. This is wool felt that we're using, or wool mix felt, which is easier for you to felt onto. If you're felting onto this kind of felt, which is just the stuff like from craft, you know, average craft shops, it's like the acrylic felt. If you try felting onto here, it starts like bending and going out of shape and things like that, whereas the proper wool felt, it's much better. It doesn't go out of shape or anything like that as you're felting onto it. So I've just folded up that top bit. Remember to keep the shape, so don't pull it too harshly. Just packing it down for now, getting it all in the right place. Now you'll notice I'm not felting this bit at the top. We need to leave that fuzzy to make it easier to attach. When you're taking it off your mat, just pull it off gently, otherwise if you yank it, it pulls some of the wool off. And notice I'm not going loads into the board, into my mat. If you do that, you're going to end up felting it into your mat and just bouncing off the mat. And it will still felt slightly through the mat, but we don't want it to be properly adhered. Now I'm just going all the way up to where the felt ends. I can feel that there's a ridge about there. I'm just going to go all the way up to there. And again, we want it so that all of the air is out of it, so it's looking nice and smooth. I'm going to turn it over again. See, I'm just taking it off slowly. Got this side, and we're just going to keep turning it and stabbing it. You see this edge here, it's getting a bit messy. I'm felting down. Now my fingers are near here, but I'm not going in straight like that towards my finger. I'm going down at an angle to the edge. So if I stab all the way through, it's just going to go into my mat. It's not going to go into my finger. If you don't feel safe doing that, if you have finger protectors, then you can wear those. If you don't, you can hold it down with something like a cocktail stick, just to hold it in place. I'm going to stab all over here again. Now I'm doing this with my red needle to start off with. I can then go over it with the blue needles. Like I said, with the brown, the needle marks don't show up so much as with the solid colours, but it does just help refine it. Oh, and put it off gradually. I'm going to do that edge as well. So going slightly downwards, you want a nice straight end, and then also doing this edge. Now you can see, because we didn't put loads of colour on this back bit, you can see some of the felt through it. I think that adds a nice effect because it has like a darker and a lighter part. If you don't like it, you can just put some more of your wool on there if you want it all to be the same colour. I just think with animals, it's nice to have a, you know, they're not all like a solid colour, are they? Turn it over again. You can see I'm doing it in a line. I need to do it in a nice ordered way, just so I know where I've been. You can see when it's done, again, when there's not any poofy bits, you get gradually off. This time I'm going at an angle because I don't want it to, the fuzzy bits to attach to my board this time, because this is going to be my last go. There we go. Okay, so that is one tail, and then we do the same with the wings. So remember, it's going to have, so one wing that way, and this wing is going to be the other way. So remember that when you're doing them, I tend to kind of put them out like this, so I remember which one I'm doing. So again, take a pinch of your felt, spread it out a bit, put on there. This will probably do both of them. And take that bit off. And remember, we want to try and get that curve a bit, so I'm going to start with that. Careful of your fingers. We want this edge to stay fluffy, because that's where we attach it. If you try and attach something that's completely felted, with no loose fibres, it's really tricky to felt on, because it's the fibres attaching to each other that help stick it together. How to do it. So when we're attaching bits, we leave fluffy fibres for them to attach to each other. Okay, I'm going to turn over. I'm going to worry about this end in a minute. Let's just get all these parts a bit more attached. A bit of vegetable matter there. Let's get rid of that. Pull it off gently. Turn it over, do the other side, but keeping the bit where we attach it fluffy. Let's sort out this end so you can kind of feel where it ends. I'm just going to pull off some of these bits because there's a bit too much there. And then I've just folded that over where the tip is, and then this bit I'm just going to bring it back down, stab it onto there so we've got that nice wing tip, and we can stab down into it at an angle to get that nice edge again, and the same on this side. If you're finding it difficult to try and get that nice edge, you can either use finger protectors and hold it between your fingers with just the very edge showing and stab down into it. So I don't use finger protectors normally for this because I don't move my needle out very much, but I'd recommend when you're first starting to do it. Or if you don't have finger protectors, you can use a handy bit of cardboard and just place it in between your cardboard like so, and just stab it like that. That protects your fingers. Okay, so that's two alternative ways that you can do if you find it's not getting the nice defined line that you want. You just don't want all fluffy bits all at the edges. Okay, so now I'd recommend when you're doing two of things, it's not so bad with this because we have the felt as a template, but when you're doing two of things, to do them one after the other so that you can compare the sizes and make sure that they look roughly the same. So I'm just going to do my other wing. I'm going to pause the video whilst I go off and do that so you don't have to watch me do another wing, but I'll just do it in exactly the same way, and I will see you just in a moment. So as you're going along, check that they are roughly the same shape. So this is the one that's finished. This is the one I'm still working on. So just check that you're keeping them about the right shape, and if you're not, stab down into them just to get them a bit more refined. Because if they're not the right shape, it's probably that you've got extra bits of wool around the edges, like beyond where the felt line was. So you can have a little feel. You might be able to feel the ridge where you're going and then stab into it to get it back to the same shape. Okay, just going to finish this one. Okay, so once those pieces are done, we are now going to attach them. So you can hold your wings on your piece. So I put them just above, just covering slightly where that oatmeal part is, the beige part, and see how they look there. That's about right. You can put them a little bit higher. If you want to hold them further away, you can always pin them on. So a couple of pins in them. And that just holds them in for you, and then you can see from a further distance whether that looks like it's in the right place. Actually, a bit more like that. Let's try this one over this side. Give us more of that angle. Then you can see them from all angles to see whether they end at roughly the same place, when they're starting at roughly the same place, how they look from the front. Now don't worry about these big fluffy bits. We're going to kind of tuck those in like so those won't come over like that. So see whether you're happy with the placement of your wings. This is what I had before. They look fine. Okay, so once you've got them, you can even leave your pins in them whilst you're stabbing them in, using your red needle, stabbing all over. Now I leave kind of like the second half of the wing, I leave that flapping. So anything you want to leave flapping, don't stab into. And I start off just going around in circles, getting that all nicely attached. Careful of your pins. And then you see I'm just going over the top as well, and you see how that is just, we haven't got the ridge anymore where I'm stabbed on there. Now this one, I'm not going to go along the edge here, because if you think on a bird, this part wouldn't be attached. If I can do it, I'm going to do it in the middle here, but I'm going to leave this nice and sharp, because I don't want it blended in like I do with the top bit. So you're blending the top bit where it is where it's attached. So now it's all in. Now I'm going to take my pins out, and then I can concentrate all on this area. See, even as I'm stabbing, it does kind of suck in those fibres a little bit, those brown ones. And have a bit of an edge there. And you want this really nice and firmly attached. You don't want somebody to come along and accidentally pull your wings off or anything. Now I can see here, see where there's a bit of a darker brown there. Some of the felt's coming through. So I'm just going to take a bit of my brown there, just pop that on top, and then just stab that on. Let's just cover that up. And you could do the same if you didn't have enough fluffy bits left over. You can just take some more of your brown and put that on top and start stabbing it in. Okay, now I'm going to go over it with my blues. Make sure there's no needle holes showing. And going all the way up so you don't leave any of that fluffiness after you've made it all nice and tight. And there we go. Now my wing is attached. And you can decide how you want it. If you want it, like at the moment, you know, it could be out like that, but you could attach just slightly down the middle, just if you do a few stabs. So it still looks like a separate wing, but it's just in a bit more. See what I mean? Okay, so that's one done. Stab a bit in there because from the front it looks a bit too much of a ridge. Okay, now I'm going to work on this one. Are they in the same place? Yes. Okay. So again, just that half, going all the way up to the top, attaching that part. At the bottom, we don't attach that very bottom line. Take your pins out once it's a bit tacked on. Now you don't want to stab all the way down to here because you're going to end up with that fluffy bit showing over your beige. So just going to pull that back in a bit. Stab, stab, stabby, stab, stab. Put it all in place. And I'm just going to go over it with my blues. Okay, and look at it from the front. Now this one is sticking out a little bit more up here, so I'm just going to stab that in a bit. And there we go. That's looking good. It looks the same on both sides. Okay, looking good. Right, now we're going to attach the tail. So decide where it is you want the tail to go, whether you want it right on that edge. And that's where I'm going to put mine. And then we just do the same thing. So you see there's a fluffiness and then the felt stops just here. You don't want to just attach the fluff on, attach some of the felt as well. So I'll be stabbing from about there upwards, so where my fingers are upwards. Make sure it's in the middle. And it pops on. So once it's tacked on slightly, I'm just going to check to make sure I'm happy with its placement and everything. Right, I might put it a little bit further up actually. Yeah, I'm going to put it about there. Yeah, see, I just kind of pulled it off. It's quite easy if it's only just tacked on. Stab it all down, stabbing this brown up into body. Okay, so that is all attached. You can do it down. You fold your tail back and do it down into this side as well. So it's nice and attached on. There we go, there's this cute little tail. Okay, so now we just need to add the eyes and the beak. Have a look, I added my beak just in the middle, just below where that where the oatmeal joins the orange. I'm just going to put some pins in here to decide where I'm going to put them. I know it doesn't look quite the same when they're red. It looks like a slightly evil robin, but that just gives you an idea. Okay, now I'm going to pop the beak in. So I take my awl and you're just going to stick it in. You don't have to go in quite far. You want to really kind of wiggle it around, make quite a big hole. Don't take your awl out until you are ready to stick your eyes or your beak in, because it does close up quite quickly. So what you're going to do is going to take some of your glue, put it on here, around the top, like so, and then just take it out and pop it in. There we go. Now it's got a beak. Obviously be a bit careful with that because it takes a little while to dry. And then I'm going to do the same with the eyes, and then I'll put the colour around the eyes afterwards. So, let's see, where is that? Just there. So again, shove it in, wiggle it around, get your eye ready, like so. Put some glue all on the wire. And then these little ones, stick that in. Okay, and then the last one. So obviously, as I said, this is a tacky glue that I really like. I did actually find this a lot cheaper. So you can get it from Amazon, but I did find it a lot cheaper in B&M. So just look around, see where you can get it. Not B&M, the range it was, sorry. There we go. So now it has a face. So finally, we are just going to add some colour around the eyes. If you see these ones, I made them kind of slightly pointed towards the edges. So you just want a small bit of your oatmeal colour. Just going to take a line off like we did when we were doing the outline. But this time I want it to be more defined. So instead of leaving it all fuzzy, I'm going to just wiggle it between my fingers, and you see it makes it a bit more of a smoother rope. Now this doesn't actually felt it, it just gets it into place a bit more. I've perhaps done mine a bit thick, so I'm just going to pull it slightly just to separate a bit more. Now obviously I'm not going to need all of this just for one eye, so I'm going to use this for both of them. Just going to pull that in half and use half for one eye. I'm going to start around this side and then going up to a kind of point up like that. So like we did before, kind of hold it roughly where you want it to be. Actually some manoeuvring to get it in the right position. I'm just going to use the blue needles for this. In fact, I'm going to use a single blue needle because it's a bit more precise. And you have to be aware that there is a wire in there from where we've put the eye. So I'm just going to go straight down, just in shallow movements. Just going to get it there to start off with. Bring it round that eye like so. Once you're happy with the positioning, then you can do a few more steps. Get it all locked in there. You don't want any fuzzies left around near the eyeball. I want it all to look a bit precise for this one, so you can see I've needle factored them all down. So now I'm turning it around and I'm going to go up and just slowly get it where I want it to go. I'm just doing it slowly until I've got it in place, and then I'm doing it a bit faster. Okay, and then this side, I want it to be a bit more like this. Tuck it down gradually. And then what I'm going to do with these extra bits, it's easier just to snip off any bits that you don't need. So I'm going to do those at an angle, like so. And then I'm just going to stab in those extras. Needle sliding down my fingers. That's one. And then the other, you need to do roughly the same. So I have my piece of wool. Go and pop it round this side first. You want it about the same width that you had the other one. You don't want them too different. So keep kind of checking back to your other one. At the same angle. Careful you don't stab the eyeball. So if you need to take this bit slow, just take it slow. There's no rush. Okay. I'm going to snip this one as well. Stamp it all down so it looks similar. There we go. I might just put a little bit more down here so this one comes out a bit more. Take some of this one. I'm going to add a bit more. Okay. Now if you're not sure it's in the right place and you find your blue needle isn't enough, you can use your red needle or even your green needle just to kind of shove it about a little bit to get them where you want them. So you see you can go in from an angle. To get them in the right place. Just have a play around until you're happy with them. And then once you're happy, then it is a finished article. Here we have our robin. Our last step now is to put the string on the top. So in your pack you have red or green. If you have a bigger needle, you could even combine them as well and twist them around each other. I'm going to do this one with a green thread. I'm going to put it through. The thing is with needle felting is that when you put the needles in there, it doesn't really make much of a hole. So I'm going to try, no, that's not quite straight. I'm going to try it about the same level. So you want it reasonably level. I'll try it here and see what it's like when it hangs up. So whether it's going to be at the right level. Right. So go test it and see whether it's going to be looking correctly when you're holding it. Yep, that looks fine. So I'm just going to tie it there and then it's all finished. Now it's ready to hang on your tree or wherever else you're going to put it, and whether it's going to go as a gift for somebody. I'll just do a little double knot. And then there we have your finished robin. There we go. Well done. Oh, there we go. Just I tweaked that a bit when I was doing putting the needle in. There we go. And now we have our little robin. Look, two cute little robins now. So well done, guys. Congratulations. If you have any questions, if you're stuck on anything, do just get in touch or put a comment on here and I will get back to you. And happy felting. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Bye bye.